The reason, a centuries-old pest solution remained largely invisible to the modern world. For most people today, pest control means something bought in a plastic bottle. It comes with chemical warnings, brand names, and instructions written in small print. Modern agriculture, especially since the mid-20th century, has been shaped by the belief that industrial problems require industrial solutions. Synthetic pesticides became the default response to insects and crop damage, and with them came an entire global industry built on chemical control. Yet, long before modern pesticide companies existed, rural communities developed their own systems of pest management. Some were crude, some ineffective, but a surprising number were both reliable and sustainable. Among the most interesting examples is a simple pest spray used for generations within Amish farming communities in North America. It has existed in slightly varied forms for roughly 3 centuries. The question worth asking is not whether the mixture works. Farmers who have used it for decades rarely doubt that it does. The real question is why knowledge like this rarely reaches the wider public. The answer says as much about modern agriculture and information systems as it does about the Amish themselves. To really understand this context, we need to step back into the agricultural world of the 18th century when, the foundations of this method first appeared. The agricultural knowledge the Amish brought with them came straight from Europe. The Amish, they didn't actually invent their farming traditions here in North America. Their agricultural practices were inherited from much older European traditions that had developed over centuries in regions like Switzerland, Germany, and Alsace. So, when Amish communities started migrating to Pennsylvania in the early 1700s, they carried with them this culture of practical self-reliance. Farming families back then were really expected to solve problems locally. If pests threatened their crops, there just weren't any commercial suppliers they could turn to. So, solutions had to come from observation, experimentation, and knowledge passed down through families. European farmers for quite a long time had understood that certain plants and household substances naturally repel insects. Things like garlic, hot peppers, and soap solutions show up again and again in agricultural manuscripts from the 17th and 18th centuries. These materials disrupt insects' ability to feed, smell, or attach themselves to plants. Over time, Amish farmers adapted these ideas into a simple liquid spray. While recipes vary slightly from community to community, the core elements remained consistent: garlic, hot pepper, mild soap, and water. This mixture did not aim to kill pests through toxic chemistry. Instead, it made plants inhospitable to insects by interfering with their biological systems. In effect, the spray functioned less like poison and more like a defensive barrier. The logic behind the ingredients reveals a deep understanding of insect behavior. At first glance, the ingredients of the Amish spray appear almost too simple to be effective, but each component has a specific biological effect on insects. Garlic contains sulfur compounds such as allicin. These compounds produce strong odors that disrupt insects' ability to locate host plants. Many insects rely heavily on scent to find food. When those signals are masked or distorted, they often move on to easier targets. So hot peppers introduce capsaicin, which is a chemical that, really irritates the sensory systems of many pests. While mammals like us experience capsaicin as heat or burning, insects actually encounter it as a pretty powerful deterrent that discourages feeding. Now soap, usually a mild dish soap or a natural one, serves more of a mechanical purpose. It reduces the surface tension of water, which just means the spray can coat leaves a lot more effectively. It also interferes with the waxy outer layer of certain insects, especially soft-bodied pests like aphids, mites, and whiteflies. And water, well, it acts as the carrier that spreads these elements across the plant surfaces. What you get is a spray that doesn't rely on just one mechanism. Instead, it disrupts insects through a bunch of small pressures, scent confusion, feeding irritation, and, surface contact effects. Modern pest science would later confirm that these multi-mechanism deterrents are, more often than not, a lot more resilient than single chemical solutions. The Amish approach in particular reflects a broader philosophy of agricultural resilience. And honestly, to understand why this spray stuck around for centuries within Amish communities, it really helps to look at the broader philosophy of Amish agriculture. Amish farmers traditionally avoid heavy dependence on external systems. Their farming culture prioritizes soil health, crop rotation, and small-scale livestock integration. These practices naturally reduce pest pressure before sprays are ever needed. When insects do appear, the goal is rarely complete eradication. Instead, the objective is balance. A garden or field does not need to be insect-free to produce healthy crops. This mindset stands in contrast to much of industrial agriculture, which often treats any insect presence as a threat requiring immediate elimination. The Amish spray fits neatly into this philosophy. It is inexpensive, easily made from household ingredients, and gentle enough to use repeatedly without harming soil ecosystems. In many ways, it reflects an older agricultural worldview, one in which the farmer works with biological systems rather than attempting to overpower them. Industrial agriculture gradually pushed these methods out of public awareness. By the mid-20th century, the agricultural landscape in North America changed dramatically. The development of synthetic pesticides during and after the Second World War reshaped farming practices worldwide. Chemicals such as DDT were initially celebrated for their effectiveness against crop pests and disease-carrying insects. Agricultural extension programs promoted these substances as modern solutions to ancient problems. For large-scale farms managing thousands of acres, chemical pesticides offered something traditional methods could not: speed and uniform application. A tractor-mounted sprayer could treat entire fields in just a few hours. As industrial farming expanded, traditional pest knowledge faded from mainstream awareness. It did not disappear entirely, but it became confined to smaller farming cultures, communities that continued to value self-reliance and low-input agriculture. The Amish were one of those communities. Because Amish society tends to remain culturally separate from mainstream media and commercial systems, much of their practical knowledge remained largely invisible outside rural regions. The rediscovery of traditional pest control began quietly in the late 20th century. Interest in traditional pest methods began returning in the late 20th century, particularly among organic farmers and gardeners. Researchers studying sustainable agriculture started examining historical farming practices that had been overshadowed by chemical solutions. Many of these older methods, as it turns out, actually have scientific merit. Garlic and pepper sprays, including versions used by Amish farmers, were tested in agricultural studies focused on natural pest deterrents. Results varied depending on crop type and pest species, but the general conclusion was consistent. These sprays could significantly reduce certain insect populations without damaging plants or beneficial insects when used correctly. In small-scale agriculture and home gardening, where precision and observation are possible, such sprays proved particularly effective. This rediscovery reinforced an important lesson. Not every agricultural problem requires a high-tech solution. Sometimes the answer already existed long before the problem was framed in modern terms. For people interested in resilience and preparedness, the Amish spray represents something more than a gardening trick. It demonstrates how low-technology systems can remain functional even when supply chains fail. In a world where many farming inputs depend on global manufacturing and transportation networks, simple solutions built from local materials have strategic value. Garlic, peppers, soap, and water can be produced or obtained almost anywhere. A pest control method built on these ingredients is inherently durable. Historically, societies that survived long periods of disruption, whether war, economic collapse, or environmental crisis, often relied on knowledge exactly like this. Practical skills, preserved through generations, allowed communities to maintain food production even when external support disappeared. The Amish, by maintaining cultural continuity with older farming systems, unintentionally preserved techniques that modern society once considered obsolete. What this small piece of agricultural history reveals about knowledge and memory. The story of the Amish pest spray illustrates a broader pattern in human history. Knowledge does not always disappear because it stops working. Sometimes it disappears because economic systems shift attention elsewhere. Industrial agriculture did not eliminate traditional pest methods because they failed. It simply replaced them with solutions better suited to large-scale commercial production. Yet when people begin looking for resilience, sustainability, and independence from complex supply chains, older methods suddenly regain relevance. This pattern has repeated many times in history. Techniques once dismissed as outdated often return when circumstances change. The Amish spray is not a miracle solution, and no serious farmer would claim it eliminates pests forever. Agriculture rarely offers permanent answers, but it represents something more valuable, a reminder that durable knowledge often lives quietly in communities that prioritize experience over novelty. Understanding those traditions expands our sense of what practical survival knowledge actually looks like. And that is precisely why stories like this matter. If you value deeper historical perspectives on survival, resilience, and overlooked knowledge, consider subscribing to Logistics of Survival. And if you think more people should understand the lessons hidden in small pieces of history like this, share the video so the conversation continues.